Hey, Immigrantly family, this is Saadia Khan. I have some great news for all of you. We recently launched our newsletter, which comes out 3 times a week. It's called Hyphenly, which is our no fluff newsletter with hot takes, heartfelt stories, and all the feels of living in between cultures. Come for the nuance, stay for the vibes. You can find the link to subscribe in our show notes. Don't forget to subscribe. Hello and welcome back to the Immigrantly Hive. This is Saadia Khan. I try not to talk about politics as much unless I'm sitting down with an explicitly political guest, because I feel our culture and identities often get lost in the noise of headlines. But recent events warrant pausing.
Bring in Dasheen. She was at the event right now. She saw the attack. She's on the phone.
Charlie Kirk's assassination is a grave tragedy. No one should be killed or targeted for speaking their mind, however heinous or hateful their views may be. And let me be clear, a person can be a loving spouse, a devoted parent, and still espouse racist, xenophobic, or violent rhetoric. Both truths can coexist. That's who Charlie Kirk was, and we cannot sanitize that truth about him. Yes, violence in any form is reprehensible, but we need to stop picking and choosing whose suffering matters. Violence is violence. If your outrage is visible in some cases but absent in others, the issue isn't the violence, it's who is being targeted. So, yes, let us, as a society, collectively condemn all forms of violence across borders, backgrounds, and beliefs. And now, listeners, I want to take a sharp pivot. Because even as these heavy truths weigh on us, life continues and culture continues to shape how we live, dream, and express ourselves. For me, that has always included fashion. I've always loved fashion, but as an immigrant, I was hyper aware of how much money I spent on clothes and shoes. Fashion felt excessive, something I admired from a distance through magazines and TV, but rarely indulged in. Even now, when I can afford more, that hesitation lingers. You know what they say, old habits die hard. Over the years, though, I've come to see fashion differently. To me, it's not just about consumption anymore. It's political, cultural, and deeply personal. It can be a form of agency or a tool of objectification. It can open doors or leave people out. Fashion is expensive and inclusive, while fast fashion comes at a hidden cost: underpaid workers, unsafe conditions, and environmental damage. And too often, the industry pushes a narrow vision of beauty that erases so many of us. That's why I wanted to sit down with someone who is actively reshaping the conversation. Who, What, Where, a digital fashion and lifestyle brand that makes trends more accessible and inclusive, is where today's guest is a managing editor. Tiff Soga is helping define what fashion means for a new generation. Aspirational, yes, but also open, thoughtful, and reflective of the world we live in. She is an academic by training. She has an interesting background, which you will learn about in this conversation. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Welcome, Tiff, to Immigrantly. So happy that you're here.
Yay, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for making time. This is I love being able to talk about all the stuff we're going to talk about today. So this is very exciting for me.
I was so excited that we have Who What Wears managing editor. And I was like, what should I wear? But then I was like, she'll only see the top part. It doesn't matter what I'm wearing. But I was nervous because I am this aspiring fashion wannabe icon or
No,
something.
no wannabe, no, but I do want to hear about your journey with fashion as well. And I will preface this with, I was extremely touched that you reach out. Usually when people reach out to me for, podcast conversations, it has nothing to do with fashion. And it's usually just about editorial strategy or my community organization background or storytelling and representation. And I will preface this entire conversation with, I do not come from fashion. So I landed this job semi untraditionally. And we can get into that, but I was literally, I asked when I was interviewing for the role of managing editor, I had asked Kat, who is my now boss and our wonderful EIC, um, if that was a hesitation, and she asked me what my relationship with fashion is, and I said, I love fashion as a consumer. I love fashion as someone who's obsessed with texture and clothing and colors, but I might not know designers off the top of my head. I might not know how to talk about certain types of fabric and design and cuts. So I really I want to stress that I have imposter syndrome at work sometimes too. No one ever makes me feel that way. Everyone is incredibly wonderful and nice, but I was also nervous about what to wear for this conversation. And I thought she is also only going to see my top half and we should be good.
So let's talk about that. Why do you think you were hesitant that you would not be a good fit for the job because you don't know designer names? Because in my mind, if you are a consumer and if you're so attuned to or interested in fashion, that should have
Yeah.
sufficed as is.
Yeah. I love that you said that, and I will be cheeky and say that that was my strategy and my response to that question in that interview. I know that when they were interviewing for candidates, Who It Wear is a really huge brand, as it deserves to be. And so a lot of people who are interviewing for the role, especially one in leadership, one that is kind of, helping to steer production and touching on editorial strategy and content strategy. I knew when I interviewed that I had in spades. And I know we're going to talk about inclusivity and how that works with editorial, especially in an industry like fashion. So I was really happy to talk about my experience there. When it came to fashion, I was very clear that their target audience are readers like you and me who might not know designer brands, who might not know all of the houses, but who love looking at beautiful clothes, feeling beautiful in what they wear. And so a lot of my response to that was if you're looking for someone who's trying to meet different audiences where they're at, as a consumer myself who had been reading Who It Wear for years, I am that person. So if I'm coming to meetings saying, hey, I think this would be a really good story, it's because I, as a reader, want to see that story. And so a lot of my response was kind of geared towards, hey, if you're looking for someone with fashion experience who has contacts, I totally get it. I am not your strongest link there. But if you're looking for someone who's passionate to serve readers what they want, and what they want is so diverse and vast, but at the end of the day, still like, I want to know what jorts are actually good for me, and what just kind of looks like, Adam Sandler fashion. I got you. It just depends on what you're looking for. And luckily, fortunately, my team is wonderful. I will say that I work with amazing humans who all know fashion to the bone. And so I have the privilege of just watching people go do amazing things and be great at their job. And I'm just helping them make sure that their bandwidth is as easy as possible, listening to where they have concerns and just like lightly touching on strategy whenever I can.
Tiff, I love what you said because I'm also a very visual person. So you show me something and I'll be like, okay, this is what I want to wear. I think the disconnect happens where I can visualize myself wearing it, but then when I do, I sometimes think that the pieces are not coming together. So I am an online shopper, which is a double whammy though, because look, my husband keeps telling me that's the worst thing you can do to yourself because you keep getting these boxes. and then they are unboxed and boxed back. And I'm like, yeah, because I can really look at myself in the comfort of my house.
Yes.
I can try it a few times.
Exactly.
And if it doesn't look good, maybe it looks good in the morning and doesn't look good in
and
the
then
evening.
Look good at night. Yep.
But here's the thing. Before we delve into fashion and what's performative versus what's inclusive, fast fashion, tell me, what is your own sense of style? How do you define Tiff Soga's sense of style?
I think that's a wonderful question and a journey, and I also want to hear from you. So in terms of my personal style, I think it's developed a lot. I got it from I got the appreciation of clothing from my mom, iconic Michelle Soga, and so I was really trying to find my fashion. I think I was an awkward teenager, incredibly awkward. I couldn't even style my hair in a way that I felt like was really me. I didn't really understand makeup. When I got to college, I really liked people watching. And so I went to university in Boston. I went to undergrad in Boston. And so Boston is such this wonderful city where there are people from all over the country. And I really liked just sitting at coffee shops and people watching and seeing what people were wearing. I think that's where my love of street fashion really comes from. And even occasional trips to New York. And New York is such a gorgeous representation of people really just stepping into their own and wearing things that aren't necessarily trendy and just owning it. And that was a lot of what I noticed over time, was that it wasn't so much what people wore, mixed matches intentional, but it was the way that people wore their clothing. It was the confidence of a walk. It was, a sway of a hip. It was a strut if you're just going to the grocery store. And I was obsessed with that visual. And I think that's what really helped me step into, okay, maybe what I like isn't what I'm seeing on a Who What Wear, or isn't what I'm seeing on the social media feeds. Maybe it's just what I like. And so over the last 10 years, I think I have a two-toned kind of, it depends on my mood. Sometimes I wear really fitted dresses. I love a tight silhouette. And then most of the time I really lean into menswear. I love baggy trousers. I love oversized t-shirts. I steal my husband's all the time. I steal his ties. I steal his suit jackets. If it's 2 to 3 sizes too big for me, perfection. And it has gotten to a point where at the office, there are a couple women at the office who go, oh, it's another white shirt day. And so I always wear, one of my formulas is just like a button down shirt, which I literally have hanging up here, and like baggy trousers and maybe like a fitted top with a tie loosely hung around. It just depends. But I think it's to your point. It's whatever I feel comfortable in. And when I feel comfortable, I wear it confidently. And that to me is my sense of fashion, is whatever I feel like when I step into a room, I show up as my fullest self. Does that answer your question?
It does, absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that, because fashion should be fluid, right? A lot of times we see people giving these like rigid instructions or toolkit of what fashion is and who should wear what and what at what age and what height and what body weight. As you said, at the end of the day, what matters is whatever you wear, how confidently you carry yourself, right?
Exactly. And it's so funny too, because I love that you're like height too. So I'm a little hobbit. I'm 5'1", 5'2" on a good day, and I usually wear heels. But so much of my work is actually remote. And so when I meet people for the first time, they're usually caught off guard by my height. And I do think it's because of the confidence that I feel based on what I'm wearing that day. Because I remember too, like before I kind of found my sense of fashion and my own sense of confidence, I felt small. And so people would be like, oh my God, Tiff's so small. She's so small. And I don't get that at all now. And again, it just comes down to what I'm wearing and how I feel when I'm wearing it. And that's for me, that's my end goal for friends. Like when they say, Tiff, let's go shopping. My end goal is like, how do you want to feel? Like, what do you want to feel today? And to your point of being fluid, like, are you leaning towards traditionally soft, traditionally feminine vibes, or are you feeling like stepping into your masculinity? Where are we going today? What's our journey?
And let me tell you, Tiff, the town that I live in, all the women, I kid you not, they live, breathe athleisure, right? So it's
yes.
always like Aloe or
Yep.
Lulu, and they live in it. And sometimes I'll go to the coffee shop at like 3 p.m. and I see a lot of aloe and I'm like, okay, I'm not doing this.
I'm not an
I
aloe
am
girl.
not doing this. I will look colorful and
Yep.
that's who I am. I come from a culture that's very colorful and I'm not going to discount that.
Yeah.
But I love this conversation because it's how we approach fashion, right? So let's talk about that. Now, you are leading a major fashion digital outlet, right? How do you distinguish between representation that feels performative and inclusion that's really genuinely, truly rooted in editorial intent?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very layered question. I will give a quick tangent preface before we dive into this too. Again, I mentioned I don't traditionally come from fashion. And I will say I don't also necessarily traditionally come from editorial. I was a former career academic. And so I decided when I was 13 years old that I was going to get my PhD in literature in England. And my parents, as immigrants in America, did not know what to do with that. And so since I was 13, I was on a mission to just study literature. And I have 4 Shakespeare tattoos. Like that, it was my entire bag. I did my undergrad in Boston. And I got into my dream master's program at the University of Bristol in England. And then I got into my dream PhD program at King's College London. And all of my work was towards the end of my academic career really focused on marginalized representation in canon. And so it's super niche, but I specifically focused on war trauma and children who are on the front lines. Because I lived in England and I was studying, at prestigious universities, I was doing a lot of work on World War II and the Blitz in London and children of the Blitz who weren't evacuated. But it came back to, on my mom's side, they're Vietnamese refugees. And so I've always felt very called to voices that have been quieted historically and making sure that if no one is talking about them, we are digging them up and putting them on the front lines because they deserve that. When I left academia, it was my mother had passed away. I'm an only child, good immigrant daughter, left my career, moved back to California to take care of my dad, which is why I'm here. And I had to start all over. I didn't stay in academia again. I love academia to my core, but it is not a great financial decision when you are that daughter for your immigrant family. And so I stepped into marketing for a little bit and really it leaned into the storyteller side of marketing, which was very much up my alley. And even then I worked at this amazing boutique creative agency here in LA called Signature Creative Agency, led by Xavier Ruffin and Rick Mendoza. And we focused on BIPOC communities and entertainment. And so I had the distinct pleasure of working on projects with Spike Lee and with Netflix and with Amazon Plus and Amazon Prime Video and Disney Plus. And all of the stories that we worked on were on communities of color and their TV shows and authentically representing that in the work that we do. Fast forward to Who, What, Where, it was one of the things that I had talked about in my interview process as well was I think fashion is this beautiful thing, but accessibility is something that comes attached to it and not something that I had been seeing fashion magazines. And even now, I think we could cover more of, especially when you talk about marginalized communities. Accessibility is such a thing that sometimes fast fashion is where we have to go, right? Because we can't afford the designer brands and Amazon is a difficult one because we're in a pickle when it comes to climate change, but we need a t-shirt. I think it's really, really hard. And so when it comes to inclusive editorial strategy, to bring it all back to a point again, I kind of look at it from a reader's perspective. Like I said, when I started discovering my sense of fashion, I was a broke grad student. And so I would go to swap meets. I would go to thrift shops. I would do closet swap days with my friends. And if I really needed to, I would go to, Amazon and kind of try all these things. And I realized that when I look at a lot of editorial content, especially, and I know we'll talk about it, but from a technical standpoint, the e-commerce aspect of it all, publications like Who or Where do rely on some of those clients, right? That's a big part of our business. And so finding that balance between, we might cover an Amazon Prime Day sale, right?
Hmm.
But we're also going to cover I personally, and I have a lot of editors on staff who really want to cover stories kind of like what I'm saying, where, you know what, we were broke, we had a community, and we leaned into it. And it's personal first person perspective stories like that we try to sprinkle in consistently throughout the year. And they're subtle, they're kind of under the radar. It's not a splashy tabloidy headline. It's just in the words. And my hope is that the more we do that, the more it bleeds into this organic identity of us as diverse people across different financial brackets and experiences and communities who just like good clothes, regardless of where they get it.
I do want to go back to what you said about authenticity, right? Now, it's a word that we hear often, authentic stories, authentic fashion. What
Yeah.
does authenticity mean to you?
I love that. I love talking about cultural appropriation versus cultural appreciation. And I think it's just respect. It comes down to respect and giving flowers and credit where credit is due. And so, I know with South Asian fashion and it being a trend right now in fashion, there's a lot of conversation around that. And I think it's when you get designers who don't acknowledge where their inspiration comes from or try to pass it off as their own. That's to me not authentic.
Right.
And even not listening to what communities are saying and kind of dismissing it. We're really fortunate that it's not something that we personally have to encounter. And our editors at Who Aware are incredibly respectful about making sure that when they're writing about stories that might not have to do with their community, that they are including voices that belong to the community. They're reaching out to folks, everyday folks, very, people of New York kind of style and getting quotes, but also reaching out to designers and reaching out to the different houses globally and seeing, where are their vendors getting their inspiration? Where are they drawing from? And really weaving those narratives into the writing that we're doing. And I think when you see editorial publications do more of that, that's where the authenticity shines.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And to your point, when we think about cultural appropriation, and you're right, we're seeing that a lot of it, especially around South Asian designs, South Asian fashion.
100%.
There is very little honoring the history, the culture, or even contextualizing it, right?
Yeah.
So I recently made a reel about nose ring or nose pins. I grew up with it. My mom wears it. My grandmother used to wear it. My aunts wear it. But in the US, it's treated as this emo phase, right?
It really is.
It's become a symbol of rebellion, while for us, it's our heritage and it's so beautifully woven into who we are. And just contextualizing it for people so that people understand where it is coming from and why it may not be what it's become in the US.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And I have a very similar, thing with jade jewelry. This literally happened on TikTok where this woman had posted that she had found this like jade ring and she really loved it or something. And then comments were flying saying, every time I wear jade jewelry, it breaks, and complaining about it. And so I think it's one of those things where it's the difference. First of all, it's not our responsibility to educate people. I just want to put that out there. That is an exhaustive. But if we choose to, we can, but it is not our responsibility to do so. But in the instances like that, I like to call people in versus call them out. And so I'll often share, like I did in that TikTok where I had responded with a comment and I was like, hey, just so everyone knows, jade is incredibly impactful in Chinese culture and heritage. I'm of a very mixed background and Chinese is one of them. And so, my mom always told me that when you wear jade bangles or rings, if they break, it's because the jade and whatever ancestral voodoo is out there has protected you from something that was coming to harm you. And I hear stories, and my mom has said it before too, where she was like, she almost fell down these stairs and something got caught and the jade bracelet snapped, but she was totally fine. And so, I've heard stories like that from my aunts, from my grandma, and it makes me really cherish that idea of jade as protection. And when it breaks, you were protected with love. And so it's sharing stories like that. And I did say, like, so if anyone is going into like a Chinatown to find a bracelet or a ring, please don't ask if the jade is fragile, if it's brittle. Please walk in with that historical knowledge of, if it breaks, it was meant to break. Come in with that cultural appreciation. And I think it's like conversations like these where we get to share stuff like that is incredibly important.
Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. And it's good to know, right?
Yeah.
Now, you talked about commercial viability. Again, your platform is commerce driven. It is based on a commerce driven model. And hence, commercial viability makes sense, right? Alongside editorial integrity, which I hope is at the center of everything.
Always.
But where do you draw the line with commercial viability, especially these days when I feel like we are living in this dystopian world and everything is just literally breaking apart, right? So,
Yeah.
where do you draw the line here?
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question and it's a difficult question. It's a tense question. And it's something that I know my team, we talk about with leadership too. We talk about a lot. It's no secret that e-commerce is what allows publications like ours and every publication to operate, to keep the lights on. And I view that as having a very different type of responsibility. And so fast fashion is something that is completely unavoidable when it comes to trend coverage. And again, it's because of accessibility, right? Like, you're trying to meet people where they're at. They need to go into a Zara. They need to go into, they have to go to Amazon, and those places are pumping out things that are on trend, and some of it looks great. And, it's where a lot of our readers shop. And so I view our responsibility as a fashion outlet to meet them at where they're at, but also to challenge or find opportunities to weave in sustainability narratives that really balance that. And so again, it kind of ties me back to those stories that we sprinkle organically throughout our market or throughout our publication is like, yes, we'll have a lot of stories about Amazon Prime Day because, let's be honest, it's where we get our basic tees. It's where we get socks, cute socks. It's where we get scarves and whatnot. Yes, but at the same time, we publish stories on, okay, what is the importance of a swap meet? What is the historical relevance of a swap meet? And how did that help people find their fashion through community? And we work on they might not be as quantity wise frequent as you may see a market story or a shopping roundup story. But that's also because those stories take time to work on. They're longer form and our editors take a lot of care. And if we have to push that story out to do a piece on a Sephora sale because we want to make sure that narrative has the time it deserves to be wonderfully written by all of our editors, we're going to do that authentically. We're not going to rush that. And so I think it's a fine line. It's tense. There are sometimes brands that we don't necessarily align with ourselves. But we also know that's where people shop. And so that's how we find our balance. Me as a leader, I will say it's a conversation I have a lot because, and we'll get into it, but I'm also the co-chair for a DEI initiative at our parent company. But I'm always telling people, hey, if there's a story you want to write and it's tied to your fashion identity, it's tied to your cultural identity. If there's a story, even if it's a seedling, let's hop on a call. Let's talk about it. Because at the end of the day, as a former academic, those are the types of stories that I love. And I think that's how we combat the need to report on fast fashion and trends.
That takes me to the question around fashion itself. Now, fashion is exclusive and expensive. People obviously gravitate towards fast fashion for a reason. Not everybody can afford a $200 or a $300 shirt, and a $20 shirt makes way more sense. It's trendy. Where is fashion lacking in its ethical and moral duty towards people?
I'm gonna need a minute because that is a whole episode in and of itself. It's I think with every industry there is opportunity everywhere for everyone to explore what their impact is on climate change. And it's funny having this conversation because, not funny is not the word, but our parent company. So Who What Wear is owned by a parent company. It's a British publishing house called Future PLC. And they do put leadership through carbon literacy training. And I don't mean like we watch videos and we answer cute little questions because I don't refer to that as training. We have a workbook It's a 3-hour session, multiple days. We sit down and we work through problems together. And it's funny because when I went through that process, I really did think if every leader in every industry, in every company was forced to do some type of training like this, I think I loved it because it was very academic. There was like an end, essay we had to write and we had to propose actions and then they'll do a check-in 3. So it felt very dissertation-y to me. But I think it's stuff like when we have that conversation about e-commerce and whatnot, one of the things that came out of my little workbook was that working in tandem as someone who's part of editorial leadership and working with our EIC and our editorial director and with our co-founder, Hillary Kerr, to go to sales and brainstorm, all right, yeah, we have our big clients, right? We know we have the Amazons and the Nordstroms, et cetera. But what are other brands that really focus on sustainability, that deserve a limelight too, because they're doing good work and their fashion is choice. It's nice. And how do we build connections with that, knowing from a business standpoint, they might not have the money of Amazon to pay. But, we do have to find where our line is. Yes, we need to operate as a business, but how do we balance that? And I think if more companies really start to have those conversations, if more leadership starts to put that on a recurring agenda every month, every quarter, and they check in and you have those conversations in your newsroom with your editors, it's a habit. You start to build that into the way that you're thinking. You start to build that into your editorial strategy. You start to build that into checklists. When you're writing your story, yeah, you have 5 Amazon products. What else can we link out? It's not a change that will happen overnight, especially in an industry like fashion. But I think it's one that if we had all of leadership really buy in and we all hold each other accountable, that's a habit that you can grow and bleed into not only workplace culture, but the work that we're serving as well.
Fashion is also connected to beauty standards, right? Who gets to present, wear, flaunt, show what fashion should look like. In my mind, when I look at the US beauty standards generally, it's a very narrow space and we don't see diverse bodies and we don't see diverse identities. And even if we do, it's more performative and optics related. How do you guys ensure that it's way more than that?
Yeah. I mean, I think I'll be very honest, and I talk about this quite openly. Who What Wear does a good job, especially compared to a lot of other publications, and it's because we have a team that really cares. But we can always do better, and I still think we can do better. And so my main thing when I walk into any room, whether that was back in academia, whether that was in marketing, or whether that's in editorial, and especially here in fashion, is that representation is who you show. Inclusion is how you show them, and inclusion is who shapes what's being shown and how those stories are being told. And I find those two to be very different things. That comes to your question of performativity, where, you have magazines that put people of color, people with different body types, people with disabilities on their cover, and that's great. But then you flip through the pages and where are those stories? Where are those narratives? And so I think when I think of representation, I always think of it not in contrast, but in tandem with the idea of genuine inclusion. And so it's like I keep saying, I am someone who really loves numbers. And I don't love the idea of metrics and this whole idea of like, we have to make sure that we're representing X amount of people, like X amount of communities. I don't love that, but I think there's something to be said about benchmarks, right? Running initial audits on seeing, and this is something that I personally am working on as kind of part of my role also as a co-chair for a DEI initiative, is looking at the body of work that we had just in this year alone. And yeah, I'm crunching numbers. How many stories do we have that feature diverse voices? And I mean across all marginalized communities, not only racial and ethnically. I want to see where we're starting with. And then kind of a loose SWOT report, if you will. Where are our weaknesses? Where are our opportunities? Where are our gaps? Where are our gaps within our staff? Where are our gaps with editors at large that we're working with, influencers that we're working with? When people are looking for sources, how big is that source pool? Who's in that source pool? And so representation, I think, is an interesting topic because in a day where every digital media is everything and we're all absorbing content, I want people to question what they're seeing. I want people to read to see if that representation is also genuinely being inclusive. And for me, that's something that I really, really try to work hard on with my editors, and everyone's receptible to it. It's just, again, it's a long game. It's not an overnight change.
I do want to go back to something that you said. So, DEI has become such a controversial topic. And you and I could sit here and talk about the politics of it, right? But I want to expand the conversation to what are organizations or outlets getting wrong about DEI? Why is messaging off point?
Yeah.
Because being a huge proponent of DEI, I feel like the messaging is off. It's again very performative. And even if it's not, it just causes more othering than anything else. So, talk to me about that. And how do you approach DEI differently than how it's viewed, seen, implemented?
I think to start with, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, began as an academic concept. It started in academia. And somewhere over the course, and I haven't done a deep dive into it, but somewhere along the course, it got woven into political rhetoric. And I think that's the first gap, is that that conversation was never meant to be had, was never structured, was never edited, was never fully fleshed out for the mass conversation. It was for scholars, and the language is written in such a way that it is very academic. And because of that, it's like when you pick up a lawsuit and you read it and it's a completely different language and you have to decode it yourself. So when you're decoding it yourself, your inferences are completely different than necessarily what the lawyer thought in the first place. It's the same thing. It's translation errors. And so when it comes to where we currently are as a country, us being in the US, everything is politically divided. You can't really extricate one from another now. And with DE&I think the idea of cancel culture became so terrifying and threatening. And that's where the performativity probably started, was an overcorrection, if you will. And so I won't dwell on that bit of it too much. I will only talk about my personal lived experience, where again, we're very lucky. Our parent company is British. And so when they heard that companies were rolling back on DEI, they said, let's roll forward. And so it was really nice, and that our parent company earlier this year did launch, and there's quote unquote small, but they're not small for those of us who feel the impact. We launched networks where, we have people leading these networks, and their job is to build support and kind of foster a safe work environment for people who may identify with whatever network they are. And so I'm the co-chair of what we call the Cultural Collective. It's really just our very vastly ethnically diverse employee pool. And I think for me, the way I approach that type of work, I have a wonderful ELT as our supervisor and my co-chair, Dami. The three of us sit down and we really phased out, what does inclusivity actually look like? Again, not representation, but inclusivity. And we break out what we do into kind of phases. Right now, we're in the phase of listening to people of color at our company and how they feel, having a safe space where they can openly share how they feel, because let's be honest, that's not always the case. And then our second phase is taking those learnings, trying to decipher what the yearnings are from those learnings, what is needed, and building initiatives upon that. So one of the things was people wanted to look for connection outside of work. We launched a book club. And the rule is all the works have to be written by people of color. Any genre. Romantasy, do it. Sci-fi, do it. Memoirs, do it, as long as it's written by a person of color. And so that's one thing we're doing. One thing we're talking about is dining clubs in different cities where we go to mom and pop only owned, family owned restaurants. And that's behind the scenes, right? That's not in our editorial work. That's just stuff that we're Slack messaging on the side, dates that we're planning via text. And so
let me stop you here, Tiff. Why not show it in your editorial walk? Why not give an insight into, or a window into, what effective or more organic culture collective looks like? Not even DEI.
Yeah, I think that's such an interesting conversation. First of all, nobody asks. Nobody asks. People don't ask. And our job at the end of the day as an editorial, as a publication, is to serve people what they want to read. And for us as a fashion publication, they want to know trends. They want to, and the human stories are a really nice cherry on top, like a lovely cherry on top. but nobody asks. I think if this were a conversation about thought leadership and business, and that's a different conversation, then people will ask. We will openly share. Like you asking me this question right now, I love talking about the work that we do with my co-chair Dami, and like I love stuff like that. And so I think it's also leaning towards that idea of performativity and even social activism. You get people posting the black squares on Instagram during Black Lives Matter resurgence. You get people like posting their I voted sticker, but it's like, okay, do you vote in your local elections too? In my opinion, I am, as someone who has been a community organizer for well over a decade, as someone who is very much a strong activist within my community and also all of my other communities of color, it's not something that I scream at the top of my lungs. It's not something I feel I need to. I carry that work with me in every action that I do. I have a sticker that I'm literally staring on my laptop that I stare at every day that says created to do good work. And it doesn't mean it needs to be seen. It just needs to be done. And if that is just me starting difficult conversations, if that's just me stirring the pot a little bit to make sure that action is being taken, that's good enough. And that's just how I approach it.
How do you measure impact for yourself?
I think it's just, I ask a lot of questions. I kind of am just I try to think of myself as like a vessel for other people. It's kind of also how I approach leadership in general. But even when I started at Who Aware, I asked a lot of questions, especially people who I knew come from marginalized communities, myself being one. I would ask them, like, how do you currently feel about the state of fashion? How do you currently feel about where we are at with the work culture and what needs improvements and what doesn't? And I kind of try to give people who feel safe an opportunity to vent. And then I check in. And if over time, as I'm checking in, I notice little things like they feel more relaxed, they're more open about sharing their experiences. It's small things like they're smiling, little things like that. That to me, it's not a metric, but it's an impact. And to me, I think I focus, while I love numbers and whatnot, when it comes to my actual team, because I love my team so much. It's that emotional and mental payoff that I'm looking for. And if I'm a small part of doing that, it's probably the caretaker, like immigrant daughter mentality. That's all I want. That's all I want to do. That's all I want to do. And if that also manages to translate into really strong KPIs and metrics, yes, that's great.
Have you ever been surprised by the feedback that you got? Like somebody said something that you weren't expecting that really shocked you?
Always. Always.
Did anything
and
humble
nowhere you
you?
go is ever going to be. My leadership style has changed a lot in the last 5 years. Like, I came from academia. It's an ivory tower. I miss academia. I love being an academic. A lot of my friends are still academics, but we are incredibly pretentious creatures. We are incredibly judgy creatures, and our expectations make no sense. And so my leadership style when I first came in was very teacher-like. And when you work with adults, that doesn't fly.
It doesn't work.
And it's great. And I tell people too, I'm very upfront where like, I'm still learning my management style. I tailor it to everybody differently. I'm also neurodivergent. I have OCD, I have ADHD, and my communication style changes based on what is triggered and what isn't. I do work style surveys with everyone that I work with, even with my direct report. And so when our check-ins we have, I do ask like, what's upward feedback? What you got for me? Did I do anything that upset you? I actually need to know. And is there anything that leadership needs to know? And I have been humbled many times. I grew up in an Asian community. I grew up in Southern California in the 626. And so when I left and when I moved to Boston, when I moved to England, I had cultural shock. And it was a lot of people correcting me, especially as an Asian woman, so close to whiteness, because that's what we are as Asians. A lot of people also checking me on my privilege. And so it's something that is always kind of in the back of my head. And if I feel myself getting a little overconfident, I like to recall those memories just to remind myself that I am not all that. But it takes conversations and people willing to trust me to share how they really feel, for which I am incredibly grateful.
Tiff, what is one thing about Who, What, Where that you wish people knew that people don't? And one thing that you hope will change in the near future?
I wish people knew how hard my team works. Like, everyone. We put out a lot of stories. We really do. There's so much fashion to cover. And we're in the happy New York Fashion Week. We're like, well, middle/end of it, fashion month. And I always worry about my team during this period because I'm like, are you drinking your emergency? Are you feeding yourself while you're running in between shows? I wish people knew, and I will say it was something I also learned not coming from fashion. Fashion is not some frivolous thing. Fashion is political. Fashion is an art. Fashion is so interesting. And when a lot of people meet fashion editors, they think, oh my God, their job must be so glamorous, and parts of it are, but my team works so hard, tirelessly. I catch them on weekends working. I catch them late at night working. I don't love that for them, but they feel responsible for it. And I don't know. I wish people could see all the work that my team really puts into what they do. And they're just, everyone's so lovely too. My only context for this job was Devil Wears Prada, and it is not that at all. I wrote in my interview notes as well, and I literally showed it to my colleagues. I was like, why is everyone so nice? Triple underline. I'm
Are you excited about Devil Wears Prada too?
Of course, who isn't? No, I'm incredibly excited for it. But it really was my only context for working at a fashion magazine, and I love that I was wrong. I get really emotional when I talk about my team, and everyone's just lovely. So I wish people knew that more, the human side of that. And then your second question was opportunities to do better?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, I think this is one thing I'll be very transparent about. When I walked into the Who What Wear office for the first time, our old office, we had a wall of our cover photographs. And so we have different talent on the wall. And this is the nature of fashion. It reflects the industry at large. But I noticed there weren't many people of color. And so I do remember when I first walked in and I saw that wall, I thought, all right, this is a white woman's space, adjust accordingly. And that's something that I wish I code switch at work. So I think a really good book that I think people should read is Hood Feminism, that talks about the impact of white feminists and what they did for us and all the amazing things because they're the reason that we as people of color have all the rights that we have, but also kind of the shadow side of that. Walking into a space that was predominantly white, I did check in immediately and adjust myself accordingly. But I will say that first impression was off. My first assumption was off. And working in the space, everyone is eager to learn. Everyone is inclusive in the way that we talk. We hold difficult conversations. No one is exclusive. But I still think I would like to see more melanin across our staff. I would like to see more body diversity. And it brings me back to our DEI initiative where in working with, my wonderful team, Shardil and Dami, one of the phases we eventually want to roll out is, all right, when it comes to recruiting, how are we recruiting people? Are we actually meeting people where they're at, or are we only posting on LinkedIn? Are we going to college fairs? Are we going to historically Black colleges? Are we looking for internships? Where are we meeting people so that we are finding truly diverse talent? And then how do we hire on merit? Where is the bias mitigation? So I think all of that is it's not a lack, but it's a want. And I feel like those changes are happening because those conversations are happening. And I feel very lucky to be in a place with people who are so open-minded about it.
Yeah. And two things. One, I agree with you on white feminism. I think white feminism had made huge inroads within the US, but it's not a great model to export. White feminism needs to be contained within certain spaces and checked. Something else that you said, which I think it's a great thing to say, but I want to clarify when you say hiring people on merit and bias mitigation. Again, I think what people don't realize a lot of times is that particular bias has favored white men and women way more than anybody else. We are basically course correcting some of that bias that favors white men and women way more, because I can guarantee you resumes with names like ours do get passed on without even measuring our merit.
No, 100%. And my husband has even mentioned before that he thought about changing his last name on his resume and taking his mother's last name, which is more ethnically ambiguous. Yeah, I think that is a whole conversation in and of itself. But starting those conversations with leadership, with, hiring teams, making sure that they're the ones putting in the work. It's not our responsibility.
Right.
First of all, we as people of color shouldn't be the ones actually doing like the work. We really
But
shouldn't be.
unfortunately, we do end up
We are.
doing
We
it.
are.
Since we have you here with us, what are some of the fall fashion trends everybody should try and one that we should retire? And I know you can't because everybody sees fashion so differently, but just give me some generalized feedback.
Listen, I'm really into, this started, I think, in the spring too, fashion month in the spring, but I'm really leaning into menswear. I want people to start wearing the oversized blazers again, ties, and seeing like people do cravats and stuff like that. And again, maybe that's just because I pay really close attention to it. But I would say play around with that gender fluid silhouette. And it's always nice in the fall too, because you can wear baggier clothes because you want to layer. But that's typically currently what I'm gravitating towards. I mean, New York Fashion Week we're kind of in the middle of it. So I really need to see what else is currently going on in the runways. Color palette wise, I'm never going to get over the chocolate brown. First of all, I think it works on my skin. So that makes me so happy. I'm clearly wearing chocolate brown now.
I love it. And I've been obsessing over it recently. So I used to think chocolate brown looks terrible on me. I don't know why I had this idea in my mind. And recently, everything that I buy, I kid you not, Tiff, it's chocolate.
It's so yummy. And I will say, it's shades of brown and what the undertone is. And if you're cool toned, color theory, I love talking about color theory. But if you find the right brown,
yeah,
exploit the heck out of that.
And what is one trend we should retire? No matter who wears it, it should just go away.
Okay. I think skinny jeans and skinny capris may or may not be making a comeback. I'm going to not directly answer your question. I'm not going to answer your question. The one thing I will say a lot of people hate still are barrel jeans.
Huh.
I love barrel jeans. And I don't understand the hate. I see a lot of it on TikTok, and this happened a lot earlier this year and last year at both fashion months, where people said, nobody looks good in barrel jeans. That is not true. Body types are different. Some people look great in barrel jeans, depending on their proportions. When it comes to trends, if it doesn't work for you, it could work for someone else. So don't say, let's retire this look. Maybe it's what someone wears and they feel confident.
That's true. That's fair.
In which case, they should do it. I really like going to coffee shops and people watching and watching what people wear and just taking a mental note. Or sometimes I will say, sometimes I do creepily take a photo. And I'm like, that pairing was interesting.
I was going to ask you, other than who, what, where should people go, on what other platform to just brush up on their fashion skills? Is there a place?
I am no longer on Instagram, and I love that for me. But I do really like TikTok. And so I quite generally have a TikTok collection of outfits. And it's just like different creators and what they're styling and how they style. And sometimes when I'm bored or I don't know what I'm wearing to the office or I'm going traveling, I'll just pull this up, look at a lot of these silhouettes and look at my closet. I won't buy new clothes because sustainability, but I'll look at what I have and see if I can do my version of it. I will say a lot of the girlies at work love Pinterest specifically for that. And so I have a folder that just says like outfits. And again, it's that whole accessibility thing. I won't necessarily go out and buy these things, but I will look for what I have that might match a silhouette. I might go thrifting.
And Tiff, in the end, if you were to define the United States of America in the context of fashion evolution, how would you do that? Or regression, or whatever you call it?
I think it's growing. I'm really excited about Gen Z entering the space. Gen Z, the ones I've worked with, Gen Z in my family, are so creative. And I think it's because they grew up at a time where creativity was a boom, even with TikTok. And so I see that in their fashion choices. I see that in the way that Gen Z shows up when they talk about sustainability and fashion. And because of that, they're the ones going to thrift stores. They're the ones, you know what I mean? Like raiding one another's closets, DIYing their outfits. This one piece that they picked out at a Goodwill, they might need they'll fix it themselves. So I think that evolution or revolution is going to be really, really exciting. I've got cousins and nieces who are Gen Z who come out looking amazing in their outfits. And I remember when I was that age, I was doing really awkward dances on my video, like an absolute did not know what I was wearing. And I admire, I think to tie it all back, it comes down to confidence and how they wear it, regardless of what the actual garment is. I think that the state of fashion in the US is about to go through its own revolutionary boom, not only creatively, but I think even down to sustainable practices. Yeah. And as long as we continue to have conversations like these, I see that movement is going to be something really, really beautiful.
Thank you so much, Tiff. This was so good.
I really enjoyed this and I love conversations like this. So thank you so much for having me.
I could go on and on about fashion. Now, again, look, I don't see myself as a fashion icon, but I am obsessed with fashion. I consume it, I see it, I learn from it. And I'm so glad that Tiff and I could talk about all things fashion. I wanted to ask her so many questions, but we were pressed for time. Hopefully, I will reach back and see if we can do another episode with Tiff where we'll talk more about trends, what's working, what isn't working. And again, I don't want us to be bogged down by trends, but it's fun to talk about trends, right? It was a fun conversation. If you liked it, please share it with a friend, a family member. Give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Just remember, we have an Apple Podcasts channel called Immigrantly Uninterrupted, where you listen to Immigrantly episodes uninterrupted, ad-free, for as little as $3.99 per month. Come on, guys, subscribe. It helps us sustain our work. This episode was produced and written by me, Saadia Khan. The editorial review is done by Shay Yu. Our editor and sound designer for this episode is Jonas Langer. Our theme music is by Simon Hutchinson, other music by Epidemic Sound. Come back next week when I have another new guest for you. Take care and don't forget to experiment with fashion.